is what they should be saying. And the same way that bowel cancer societies should be just saying outright, don't consume processed meat. Often the language that they'll use will be something like eat the least amount possible or minimize it or something like that.
But with one egg, you've basically maxed out your daily allowance for cholesterol. So if you're eating one egg, the rest of your diet that day would have to be vegan to stay within the guidelines. When you're talking about a whole egg, you're talking about a food product that's 63% fat. There's so much obviously wrong with eggs in terms of just taking a glance at what nutrients they contain and what they're made of.
So do eggs have an effect on blood cholesterol?
Eggs are used to make chocolate cake, okay?
No.
They're used to make brownies.
Well, that's
it's
irrelevant.
not a health food. It never has been.
Like salt that's irrelevant. I want to point out, though, that eggs, in terms of affecting blood cholesterol, I'm finding a lot of contentious reports on that one. There's no doubt to the fact that they are high in cholesterol. I can explain that to you.
So there's something called the Hegstead equation, or there's also the Keyes equation. Basically, the idea is what happens is if you don't have any cholesterol and very low saturated fats in your diet, if you add a stack of it to your diet, it'll have this huge spike. And as you add more and more, there's the response is less and less. And that's where the contention comes in. So what happens is if we got, I don't know, someone like me or one of the other people in here who has, no cholesterol and low saturated fats in their diet, and you just added a bunch of saturated fat and cholesterol to their diet, you'd see a massive spike in their cholesterol levels. But then if you got somebody on average who's eating quite let's just say 2-3 eggs for the sake of the argument, and then you add an egg, the effect that the first 2-3 eggs would have had on the vegan or whatever is or the effect that the first egg would have had on the vegan is not going to be the same as the 5th egg on the person who's eating saturated fat and cholesterol on a daily.
I'm kind of understanding. It seems like if you have the right diet, multiple eggs are fine. And if it matters, my blood cholesterol is well under control, and I've had like about 2 eggs, like on average a day.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you mean by under control, because
how you cope with cholesterol
there's
is
people
also
that'll
genetic
say.
to a huge extent.
Okay, so regardless, then I would be fine.
One egg is giving you 24 grams of fat, 7.5 grams of saturated fat. I'm sorry, just looking at the basic facts of what is an egg. Eggs are not health food. They have never. It's not broccoli.
My health seems to be in check.
It's not a healthy food stuff. It never has been. Cholesterol is a huge issue
because it doesn't matter, right?
I'll just make a simple statement. So the amount that you would have to eat to get good amounts of nutrients from eggs is quite a lot. And by the time you actually start getting some nutritional value from them, you'll also be adding in a whole lot of problems from them as well. So I think I can't remember off the top of my head because I haven't looked at it for a while, but they'll often talk about things like selenium, B12, and shit like that. I think
B12 you can get from like fermented things.
They do have selenium.
You can get it from several other places. You can just
eggs do have
you can get fortified foods and shit like that. Yeah. I'm just using it as an example. So you've got things like B12 and selenium and shit
B12
like
you can get from a lot of vegan places.
Yeah, that's not the point. The point I'm making is that the things that are advertised as being good that you can get from eggs, you often have to eat quite a lot of eggs to get an okay amount of that thing. So whether it's B12, selenium, whatever. But once you start actually eating enough to get some value from the eggs, you start getting such a large amount of cholesterol that the positive is far outweighed by the negative.
Right, and the ideal amount of cholesterol in the human diet is 0. Look, to get the same amount of protein from one egg.
If you're not sure about that, I'm happy for you to just tell me what nutrients you think you're getting. And
I would just like to see any sort. I would just like to see like some academic papers that say that eggs are just a waste of time.
Right, we can
as
do
far
it,
as I
but
know, as far as I know, somebody can drop that. But as far as I know,
I just want to tell you the protein to fat ratio.
Interesting.
Can you stop talking over each other?
Yeah, thank you. So
I mean, just for what it's worth.
Hold on.
If you're saying,
let me just finish this thought. All right. As far as I know, eggs are seen to have a beneficial amount of nutrition, especially for like what they like per weight or per ounce. And if you want to show me, if you want to convince me that eggs are just a wash, they're just basically sacks of fat or sacks of cholesterol, just like give me the empiricals on that one.
Yeah. So what nutrient? I mean, I'll just ask you, what nutrients do you think you're actually getting from them, and what value do you think you're
But
getting?
look, can I
I
answer
don't
his
remember.
question? Sorry, he's asked a direct question that you're
Just
not
give me a
answering because I can
couple of
answer that
just give me a
question.
couple
Okay.
of things.
Sorry, PCRM had a famous, so PCRM is Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. They had a famous lawsuit taking the egg lobby to court precisely because they were violating US national guidelines on health, that they were presenting advertising claiming that eggs were healthy, and that actually, even if you read the US government's own guidelines, they were not healthy for exactly these reasons. So there are famous cases that document this with real facts and real studies and everything else that went to court and set precedent in the United States of America. And that's not that many years ago. That's why those are famous, well-known cases. Yes, it's good for you to ask for academic studies, but as I said earlier, you haven't looked up the basic nutrition data like the ratio of fat to protein. Eggs do contain a lot of protein. Okay, it's a significant concession. I'm not going to say to you eggs have zero nutritional value. Eggs contain a lot of protein. So a whole egg has about 30.6 grams of protein. That's a lot of protein. Okay. However, in order to get those 30.6 grams of protein, you're getting 24.2 grams of fat. And a lot of that is saturated fat. It's incredibly unhealthy, and there's cholesterol. Now, by contrast, the staple of my diet is a type of red bean called an adzuki bean. For me to get the same amount of protein as one egg from these red beans gives me 0.4 grams of fat. Okay? So 0.4 grams of fat versus 24.2 grams of fat. And adzuki beans have zero cholesterol, zero saturated fat. These are trace amounts of plant fat that are contained in these beans. Okay? So there is no comparison. Eggs are not a health food. They're not comparable to beans or broccoli or salad or anything that's healthy.
I'm just going to put a picture up in.
All right, and I also had while Isa was saying something, I was looking at different like academic sources about the effect of eggs on health. Some, as far as I know, seem to be suggesting that eggs are part of a healthy diet, and some are saying that eggs are neutral. And I'm trying to find ones where they say that eggs are like a component of like heart disease. Like I think I might be doing this wrong, or I think I might be uncharitable in the sense that I'm limiting my searches
Oh,
from 2015 up.
bro,
So it could be
I'm
that
an
the
Yeah,
things
expert
that
at
are
Google
just one
compare.
second. Just 1 second. So, like I put up this is just a quick Google nutrition sort of table that I put up. So I don't know where I think
This is
Isel
not
said
rocket
30
science.
grams, but this is so egg 100. This is 100 grams of eggs, which I think is like I think a large or medium or large egg is something like 50 grams or some shit was what it calculated. But so this is about I don't know one egg or so maybe worth. I think it gives you about 13 grams of protein, which isn't a huge amount. It covers your entire day's worth of cholesterol, and so vitamin A 10%, vitamin C nothing, vitamin D 20%, calcium 5%, iron
It's
9%.
a
So
garbage food.
if you think that through, and B12 I think it says 14%, so which is B12. So if you think that through, you'd have to get any of those up to 100 to your daily amount. You'd have to eat about 5 eggs a day to actually get a decent amount from them, right? And that's just probably maybe vitamin D. And the best way to get vitamin D really is to just go out into the sun. Things like vitamin A, you can eat 2 carrots, and that will give you your entire day's worth of vitamin A. B12, again, you can just take fortified. Calcium, you can eat fortified soy milk or whatever, and that'll give you more than that just from a glass or just from a bowl of cereal worth of soy milk. That'll easily give you way more calcium. Um, there's the mechanism by which it causes heart disease is the cholesterol that is in the egg. So it's not just saying eggs cause cholesterol. So egg cause heart disease. It's egg. The cholesterol in eggs cause a spike in your cholesterol, and that is the mechanism by which it occurs. So
You both got that infographic. The first point made on that infographic from PCRM is the same thing I said. It's over 60% fat, calories from fat. There's no way any food is going to be healthy that way. Doesn't matter if it's vegan or not. It's, obviously it's not a health food. Consuming eggs increases your risk of cardiovascular disease by 19%, colon cancer by 5 times, diabetes by 68%, lethal prostate cancer by 81%. It's rich in cholesterol. The ideal amount of cholesterol in the human diet is 0. Some people, there is a genetic range of how much cholesterol you produce and how much you retain as a person. Somebody, Isaac will remember, Mod Vegan. She has that genetic anomaly. She can eat an infinite amount of cholesterol and never have cholesterol problems. She's one of those people on the spectrum. So before she was vegan, she could eat bacon all day and her cholesterol would never go up. Some people have that condition. But nevertheless, the ideal amount of cholesterol in the human diet is 0. But hey, it was more intellectually stimulating to have to debate whether or not, using chicken poo as fertilizer ethically justified animal products.
Can I add a couple points?
That was more difficult to debate.
Hey, it's Mike here. I want to add a couple points. So I'm not sure if anybody linked it. I'm in my tiny house right now, so I can't type anything. But
oh, he's gone.
You cut out.
He was silenced by the Russians. You hear that?
Egg consumption and carotid plaque, that shows an exponential association between egg consumption and carotid plaque. That's pretty much on par with smoking cigarettes. And I just want to know, my main question is, why do you think that cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease? So I assume you admit that eating cholesterol raises cholesterol. Do you?
Depending on how, so there's ways that cholesterol interacts with the body, where eating cholesterol doesn't necessarily translate into blood cholesterol, right? There's different.
You can literally, when you eat an egg, you see a spike in cholesterol, 2 eggs larger, spike in cholesterol, 3 eggs. The studies in my eating cholesterol doesn't raise cholesterol video. I'm sorry, I can't get it for you guys, but I have the study.
I can put up a meta-analysis where they had people in wards. So basically they controlled their entire diets. And there's a meta-analysis of several kinds of these studies whereby they added and took cholesterol out of people's diets, and it had a predictive effect of increasing and reducing cholesterol as they did it. So I'll just link that up.
But either way, I don't think there's a case to be made that eating cholesterol in the form of eggs does not raise cholesterol. It's probably one of the main reasons that vegans are the only ones with ice.
But the idea is that when you raise cholesterol, that there is an acceptable threshold you can raise it to, as it also can be a source of fat that your body might need.
Well, what do you consider an acceptable threshold? That you're probably still going to die of heart disease? Because the only group has,
Yeah.
The only group that has ideal level of cholesterol, the only diet that's been shown to reverse heart disease, is a whole food vegan diet. So the moment you're including cholesterol, it's over.
Wait, when you say reduce heart disease, you mean from people who are at risk?
Reverse heart disease. So study, Esselstyn study, 200 people, putting them on whole food vegan diet, showing unclogging of arteries. These are people with advanced cardiovascular disease. Over 12 years, 60% of the people who failed the diet, it was about 30 people, they had 60% rate of heart attacks and strokes. Of the 277 people that stayed on it, 0.6%. Yes. Okay. So that's just an example. So that's another end of the same discussion, because most people are probably going to die of heart disease.
Right. So in the case of someone who's at risk or has conditions where they want to reduce their cholesterol, I think it's pretty obvious that you should do things to where you want to reduce your cholesterol, right?
Everybody is at risk of heart disease. If you look at a study, I believe it was cholesterol. I can find it later. But virtually all children by the age of 3 now in the U.S. have fatty streaks on their aorta. The last thing you want is high cholesterol. We're seeing spinal disc degeneration leading to, caused by clogged back arteries in 11 to 16-year-olds now. And that's a Volvo Science Awards winning study. I got to find the names of all these studies.
The nutritional value of eggs was raised here as a justification for the acknowledged immorality of farming, factory farming, and from his perspective, to a lesser extent, smaller farming.
Wait, who raised that?
So just let me finish my sentence. Only one sentence. If you think the nutritional value of eggs is so great that it justifies the animal holocaust, that justifies animals living in captivity their whole lives and then having their necks slaughtered, having their necks cut and so on, then what do you think about adzuki beans? Adzuki beans must justify mass murder on an unbelievable scale. You must worship adzuki beans as if aliens have landed from outer space, because the nutritional value of a common food like adzuki beans is exponentially so much healthier, so much more impressive than eggs, even if you just glance at the basic nutritional data.
I have no idea what you're trying to communicate. Somebody translate for me.
I'll just keep it simple. Well, basically, there's no need for cholesterol in your diet, and the very small amount of benefits that come from eggs is going to be just way outweighed by the negative it brings. There's no need for dietary cholesterol in your diet, and most people, without even doing a blood work on you, would benefit by far by just taking dietary cholesterol out of their diet and swapping saturated fats for PUFAs, for example.
But it seems like you would need cholesterol in your diet, at least some amount.
No,
at least
that's actually incorrect. So your body synthesizes
I think it would be more
cholesterol that you need.
convincing to me to just see the literature, in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I can
because
just
literature is persuasive to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a lot of literature. I can just show you a link from a state government health website, which obviously is not pro-vegan or anything like that, or anti-animal products, but they'll just say it simply that cholesterol is not required in the diet. Just give me 2 seconds, I'll get you that link.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
It's frustrating because all my videos have like 15, an average of like 15 studies underneath them, and I just can't show you right now. But all the studies I'm mentioning, you're seeing that spike in cholesterol, and then you want to go further of do you think that high cholesterol is damaging?
Wait, what would you say?
Do you believe that having high cholesterol is damaging?
Obviously.
So you do. Okay, so that's a lot of people deny that openly.
Who would deny that?
For that.
No.
Literally everyone.
Wait, did I ever give the impression that I said that cholesterol, high? In fact, I said this explicitly, that high cholesterol is just going to be bad for you. Did I get off the impression that I think cholesterol?
I mean, just the fact that you would deny the fact that eggs would be a danger to cholesterol. It's very much part of erasing the diet heart hypothesis.
Well, the reason I said it wasn't bad is because I'm looking at health guidelines right now as we're talking, and the amount of cholesterol per egg seems to be if you that you can have 2 and still remain within the healthy level.
Well, the normal range, and normal is unhealthy in this current situation.
I didn't hear you. Can you repeat that? Someone else was saying something.
Within the normal, okay, there's normal in a sick society where most people are probably going to die of heart disease, and then there's optimal, which is not considered the standard normal. So you can maybe hover just under 200 where you're still probably going to die of heart disease, but to get under 150, or ideal in terms of LDL is 50 to 70. My LDL is, I think, even lower than 50, and that's basically impossible if you eat eggs. And so you're going to have progression of atherosclerosis and likely to be die of heart. Still likely to die of heart disease.
There's the Harvard thing I was reading that talks about the vitalness of some cholesterol in your diet, or I guess in your body technically.
Yeah, just quickly. So I put up just above your link. It's a link to the Victorian, so the state that I live in, the government.
Australia.
Yeah. And I think it's just in the dot points, in the first 3 dot points. Yeah, so we know about our cholesterol.
Are you proposing there's a danger of not having cholesterol in your diet?
It seems like cholesterol, from what I read, it seems like cholesterol is needed for making types of hormones in your body. And hormone production usually you don't want to fuck with.
We still make 80% of the cholesterol in our body, depending on how much you consume. Like on average, 80% of our cholesterol. Gotcha. And there are myths based off low cholesterol. So people who are dying of cancer, their cholesterol might go, crash. And then people say, oh, low cholesterol is an issue.
The link that this guy gave says that your body produces all the cholesterol it needs.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There's this
so.
Okay. So yeah, this is one of several things that talk about whether to eat cholesterol or to not eat cholesterol. But this is persuasive in all honesty.
Yeah, and if you want to tie it back to the original topic, I'm okay with that.
What was the original topic?
Were you were debating like fertilizer or something when I first came?
No, that was just
Yeah.
well, just being
Fertilizer
ridiculous.
was one of the justifications for eating chicken eggs.
No,
So,
it wasn't.
as I say,
So this is a
ultimately, the point is
conversation
that-
about eggs. Okay.
Yeah,
This
well,
is a
the point
conversation
is
about eggs,
ethical
but
justification
might as
for
well
eating
is
chicken.
forgetting how this started. Right, we started talking about fertilizer as one of the things in which like farmers use chickens for, right? That they would still probably they might still probably be on a farm even if there wasn't demand.
What?
That's definitely not correct. It would not be cost effective to raise chickens just for fertilizer. I don't think so.
It's fair.
This fucking Looney Tune shit. Jesus Christ.
For what it's worth, would it be convincing? Like, do you see a situation where the small scale farms are I guess scaled out and used as the method to feed?
Yeah, I think no one here is going to agree that we ought to have industrial farms. Like the optimal mode of production should be to small scale farms.
Yeah, that's fine. And do you think that it'd be a good way to, like, using animals on these farms would be a good way to, I guess, scale up and provide the most amount of food for people?
Yeah, because there's a lot of the things that we use in farms, like industrially produced manures, really ought to be phased out, right? They can't like support, or they can't support uh, like the agriculture over like entire world. So it makes sense to go back to a more sustainable form of ecology where you would like feed scraps and things that aren't fit for consumption to animals, and they would poop it, and that would go back into the soil, etc.
I do
Do you
have a
know
bit
what
of a
that's like?
problem with
Have you
that.
lived on a farm like that?
There's
It's
Oh,
fucking hell on
there's
earth.
tell me more of your anecdotes,
there's
young
just
man.
Dude,
sorry.
it's you have like what makes you think this is fucking lost Arcadia? To live on a small plot
What
farm
is
with
that
a pig
reference?
outside your window and a
Um,
fucking chicken hutch, it's horrible. It's horrible for the human beings as well as the animals. And
Why
yeah,
is it
there's
horrible
constant
to have a
poo and
farm?
blood from the
That's
animals and
how
so on. It's
people
unbelievably awful.
lived for thousands of years.
Can I add a point also here?
Go for it. Add a point.
There's if you look at Polyface Farm, which is like the face, no pun intended, of like
Oh, where is it?
regenerative agriculture. Yeah. If you're
Did you
looking
put a
at their
link down,
chicken
or should I
tractor
Google
thing,
it?
Polyface Farm, you never heard of it? Okay.
I can't. Not top of my
So you
head.
can just Google it, but just talking about the point here is that there's been a large, I don't even want to say campaign, but just a notion that chicken tractors are all you need, et cetera, to be fertilizing. And then I believe there was a Guardian article, New York Times article, I can find it, showing that actually Polyface Farm was shipping in tens of thousands of pounds of grain to feed the chickens, which were then fertilizing, quote unquote, the cow fields. And so it's a matter of where the nutrients came from, and it's not the chickens won't just
Right. Yeah. The
magically create
nutrients need.
nutrients.
Yeah, they got to be local, right? That has to be the case where you need to be able to recycle. That's why like production needs to be scaled to be to local. You can't have this kind of like international trade of food where nutrients are like leaving the soil. You got to like or you end up like destroying the soil afterward. But yeah,
But look,
I've
also
I've
in the
just put
free
up a
market.
link in general, which actually addressed that fact. So the sort of thought about the small scale farming, and actually it's often not that efficient. So if we're talking about a growing human population, it's often going to be the case that some sort of industrialized methods are going to be just better at feeding people. So this is an article from a couple, I think, that runs a small scale farm. But there's also an interesting comment by a guy called George Monbiot. I'll just put
I
up the
thought. Did you
comment.
post the veganism isn't the answer thing?
George
Yeah, that's
Monbiot
the
wrote a
one.
series of books
Gotcha.
on this topic. He's written several books. Go on.
So is their thesis basically that changing away from animal products isn't enough to uh, like meet the demands that industrial farming is trying to meet? Is that what they're trying to?
So they're more saying that the best way to go about changing the farming products or farming production, I guess, is to move towards more small scale farms,
Yeah,
sort of what
that's true.
you're going down. Yes. So in the comment that I put up, it's the first comment, or the pick comment. It's written by George Monbiot, who's a journalist for The Guardian as well. He's spent quite a lot of time. He's actually pretty interesting if you look into him. So he initially turned vegan, and all of his concerns are just completely environmental based and food efficiency based. So
Right.
he initially turned vegan because of the environmental cost and how concerned he was with how much of environmental damage he was doing, and it looked like you could very easily feed the world on a vegan diet instead. He then met some people who said that this isn't true, and if you do locavorism and shit like that, that would be better. And so he flipped back being like a locavorist type diet. And then about 3 years later, he flipped back again to veganism after he looked more into the numbers and found that most of the people that were making the small scale claims really couldn't back it up with the numbers. And he responded on this article, and I think it's the first comment. So I'll just post it again. But yeah, basically he points out that the UK population could easily be fed if we went to a completely vegan diet, just even on an industrial type. And not only would they be able to easily feed them, but they could easily feed probably 4 times as much.
I guess my question is, do you believe that we can feed the world with a vegan diet? Do you believe that fertilizer is possible? Are we even disagreeing it?
I just realized that I hadn't pushed the push talk button. I was trying
Uh,
to talk for a bit. From what I've seen, most or a lot of ecologists and like especially like out of Rutgers, they do a lot of agricultural sciences there. They say that if you wanted to create a production system that's going to be sustainable and can support people, a pure vegan method. Uh, this is like from like the last 2016 onward, where there was like a resurgence in like interest, isn't going to be cutting it, and that there was, and like I linked one of the PBS articles about it earlier, and that animal, especially with aquaculture and with like milk friendly. I hate saying that word because I don't like milking cows, but I don't. I would like bite that bullet if it like meant some sort of like sustainable outcome that met people's needs. But it seems like a lot of experts agree that an efficient and sustained production setup is going to involve animals to some extent.
okay, so obviously I disagree with you. You're probably getting that from the Elementa study on carrying capacity, which looked at feeding the world with and without animals. And in that study, something you won't hear is that a vegan diet uses 1/6 of the land. And so, but then the news sort of twisted it as actually you can have a larger carrying capacity on the Earth because they totally miscategorized what is considered arable land. So they basically said anything that we're not growing crops on right now is not arable, which is absurd. It doesn't count anything that can be terraced. It doesn't count anything that you can plant.
Like, one of us cut out,
To say it's
or
insane
did
the
you
amount
finish
of
talking?
underutilized. No, it's insane
Can I
the
just
amount of
add?
underutilized thing.
Look, this is in apropos the issue of fertilizer, but it also covers a lot of the questions about byproducts and indirect quote unquote benefits of animal products. Whey powder is extremely cheap. Whey powder is not valuable. It's a waste product spun off by basically the cheese industry by turning dairy products into cheese. So whey powder is available at low prices. Chicken poo also is a non-valuable waste product they have to get rid of. Now, whey powder also, it's very hard to get rid of safely. So they basically is a subsidized product because it's a byproduct they need to get rid of. If you can Google what the prices are for the different types of fertilizer, if chicken poo were valuable in the way you were suggesting, if that kind of fertilizer were valuable, it would be more expensive than chemical fertilizer on the free market. And it is not. It is
That doesn't
dramatically
follow.
cheaper. And again, I pointed out there is a cultural memory about bat guano. I checked the prices. Bat guano still is genuinely valuable, genuinely expensive. It's more expensive than chemical fertilizer. It's way more expensive than chicken fertilizer. But chicken fertilizer within Georgia, currently you can get it for $14 per ton. If they got to ship it further, it looks like the current price is $80 per ton, whereas you're talking about like $850 per ton for bat guano. So I just say the idea you started with, the chicken fertilizer, is something so useful and so valuable that it justifies this stuff, that is very
I never
easily
said that.
refuted just by looking at market value.
I don't know why you keep strawmanning that. That's ridiculous. Who said that? Did anybody hear me? Like, because chicken poop is so good for farms that it's okay to just murder the shit out of them? No.
It was a big part of your defense of small farming as opposed
No,
to
it
factory farming.
wasn't.
Yes,
All right,
you did.
go for it.
Okay, then you expressed yourself very poorly. If you want to say that's not what you mean now, that's fine, and I'll accept
All right,
that.
if you can't repeat my own argument to me, right? You just can't do that. Then I don't know why you're attacking it.
I must be very stupid. I must be very stupid.
Well,
Okay, thank you
I
for
think
restating your argument so clearly now. Why don't you let me
I'm
know
glad
why you
you're
thought
not
it
the
was so
only one
important?
who
Tell
has
us
that
the
opinion,
importance
which is
of
good.
chicken poo.
Right. So we
You
talked
gave
about
us a
chicken
long
poo
narrative.
being. All right. What was the long narrative? Some of
Well, I mean, do you want to finish up tying up just the idea quickly? The idea that you need animals to feed the world. I mean, for example,
right.
from the
That's
FAO,
like
up to half of the
that's
world's
just gonna
grain.
be like empirical, right? That's not something that's gonna be and that's not an ethical debate. That's not any of these other empirical debates, right? Now I'm remembering like the
Can I just add
IPCC
one more
reports. I'm
point just to
remembering
close that
the
out, though, because I think it's
was it
important.
what'd you
Just want
say?
to add one point just to
No,
close
go
it
for
out
it.
because that's important. So the amount of grain that we feed in North America alone could feed every single hungry person on Earth. People who are food insecure. That's from a Cornell
Remember
article.
those
You can easily
that
do.
grain edible but to people, FYI.
Doesn't matter. If you just switch it over, it's a matter of that we are capable of producing
No.
these things.
The grains that are edible to people use a lot more water, and they're a lot more nitrogen. They're a lot less nitrogen fixing
You can
than
still
say like
turn
cheaper.
that stuff into refined products.
You mean the stuff that's not fit for people?
Yeah, I mean isn't that like refined? Isn't that like corn syrup and stuff? There's
No,
food products that can
it's
be made
not.
of, and it's also isn't
No,
that also about when it's harvested?
it's all sorts of factors, but like the very plants don't like there's like there's strains of cheap grain that's used to make feed for other animals that regardless of when they're picked isn't going to be something that people should be eating.
Should be eating. The point is, in terms of calories, in terms of land, in terms of these resources, we can easily shift to feed every hungry person in the world just with one
I don't know about that one.
easily.
Like,
And that's not
I
even
know
counting
it may be
non-edible.
the case. Like that may be the case, but if you want it to be convincing, there's gonna have to be like empirics behind that, right?
I literally can't. I'd
like,
love to close the window and look at a bunch of research, but I'm on my phone. I can't. I will
that's
say,
fine.
Google
I'm not
Cornell
saying you're
300
necessarily
million.
wrong, but if okay, what's it called? What do I look up?
Cornell, I believe it's 300 million, and that should get 300 million.
800 million.
800 million. Sorry, 800 million people. Yeah, it's 800
800.
million hungry people in the world, and there's just in terms of calories.
The U.S. could feed. This is from 2015.
Still the same
right?
amount of hungry people.
We can also just produce a paper.
Oh wait, no, this is from
by a guy called
1997.
Yeah, so
And I'm telling you, we still have the
actually
same
less.
amount of
There's
hungry
actually less.
Yeah,
There's actually less
but-
animals being fed then, so it's probably more now.
right. But I think if I'm gonna be taking this as a source, like I don't, or if I'm gonna be taking something as a source, I'd like it to be like more updated, especially
So
things that have
things
taken.
that were discovered 20 years ago don't
just
count. So the Earth is no longer
yeah.
around because we discovered it a while ago.
No.
Okay.
There's an easier
I think I'm
point.
cutting. Wait,
There's
hold on.
just an
I think
easier
I'm cutting
point.
out because like whatever you guys said, can you guys repeat because I cut out?
I'm just saying there's an easier point because that's from 1997 or whatever, right? The
Yes.
US actually ate less animals back then. So they actually, if they're saying back then the food that they're feeding to the animals could feed 800 million people, the amount of consumption of animals in America has actually gone up. So that's probably the fact that it's out of date is probably worse for your argument.
No, I don't think that's the case. If you can find like the reason I don't think that's the case is one, that doesn't take into account all sorts of things we know about climate change today, or things we know about the soil. Because like in the mid 2000s, we spent like a lot of money in our agricultural sciences. We like really buffed that up, and I'm a little bit skeptical of things like honestly before 2010. So if we have empirical data that like from no like recently that corroborates this, then sure, right? Like I
Yeah,
know we
sure.
can feed the world, but like I don't know like whether the claims that this makes is going to be something that we can hold to.
Yeah, so I can just get you a paper from a guy called Joseph Poore, which shows that the best efficient diet is a vegan diet, and that the carrying capacity of Earth would easily feed the expected population of 2050, which is like 10
Yeah,
billion
sure, go
people.
for it. Because like I'm looking at other ideal diets, and a lot of them are they involve like fish and like they're pescatarian, which is something I don't want to like.
I mean, you
do.
understand the main point here, though, is that when we are feeding animals, we are siphoning grain down. I mean, laws of thermodynamics, all right? So you are siphoning down, you're losing energy by feeding food to animals, you know, depending on the animal, it's more or less loss. So there's no way, especially when you're feeding animals,
What do
like
you mean by
especially when you're doing fish farming.
losing energy? I don't understand that.
So if you feed 1 calorie to an animal, there's no way you can get 1 or more calories back.
So we did
Well, what's
Just
start
the
with
law.
this, Mike. Mike, I'm not denying my
Okay.
definition.
Okay.
We did already
So we're
explain this
circling
just
back.
before you joined. Just before you came in, that was exactly what went over, was the flow chart of the fact that mathematically it must be the case that eating animal products is less efficient and kills more mice. Like if you're ethically opposed to mice being killed, you're killing more mice to eat beef or chicken or eggs. So we did start with that. I completely agree with you. Completely encourage you to go on, but we have already shoved this down this guy's throat.
Okay, but do you not believe that's true? Just
Leave
wondering.
I mean the mice thing? I don't
Do you
I'm
not
honestly.
responding by
believe that
talking
we
about
lose
fucking
do you not
fertilizer. How do we
believe
get
do you
into this
not
other
do you
shit?
believe
All right, maybe if we don't do the whole everyone talks at the exact same time, maybe we can like hear something.
Okay, do you believe that the laws of thermodynamics do not apply to raising animals? That we do not lose energy
No,
when we feed?
that's ridiculous.
So
But
we
the
do. So
point
it's
is, like,
inefficiency.
it doesn't matter, right? There's like calories that we just don't eat. So
But you can.
the efficiency is normative, right? So efficiency has to be with regard to some goal. And if the goal is merely to cram as much calories down a person's throat where they could be eating dirt or whatever, right? Anything that would have gone to an animal just goes to them, sure, right? But if we're talking about optimizing like calorie per food that we find enjoyable or palatable, etc., that's going to be different.
We're also just looking at calories. We're talking about calories because that's what people
Not
die of starvation from. But you can plant other plants that have higher nutrient values in certain ways. It doesn't have to just be
right. But a lot of those take like have a higher water requirement. Most things that
legumes,
people
high protein. They
like,
do not have a super high water requirement. I mean, I live right next to a soybean.
I think legumes and like beans in generals don't, right? But like for fruit, that's one of the things that has a higher water content, or a lot of
And
like
you do not
vegetables,
have to eat fruit.
broccoli. You don't have to eat fruit. I
If
mean,
we,
that's
if it's a
probably
matter of
going to be
somebody
the case for a
starving
lot
to
of
death
people,
or
yeah.
not, so we're
Well,
talking
I mean,
about.
an optimal like production thing, people would just have to eat what's local to them, right? Like so, like people would not have avocado for the most
I
part.
don't agree
People
with
wouldn't
that.
have
I believe that if you ship a banana from Ecuador on a freight, you can actually be doing less energy than local greenhouse grown veggies, or emit less
it's just
greenhouse gases than
putting
a local
more
cow.
carbon into the air.
No,
It's
it's
just
not,
putting more
because
yeah,
carbon
banana
into the
per
air.
no. If you look at banana, like CO2 per banana, CO2 per nutrient per calorie, and so forth, you just because of the massive size of a freighter ship and the cost of CO2 per mile that freight is driven per pound, it's exorbitantly low. So you're going to be way lower than that than, for example, having a cow in your backyard that's literally burping up exorbitant amounts of methane on a
Wait,
daily
are you
basis.
saying the lifetime of a freighter operating over like the lifetime of a cow? So those are the two same things. You're saying the cow is going to be more detrimental to the environment, the single cow versus the freighter?
I'm saying a freighter. I'm talking about the banana, the shipment of food. I'm saying that not in all cases is local lower.
Right. But I'm
footprint.
saying that freighters, like just having freighters in general, is going to be bad for the environment, right? It's per
Well,
calorie.
not as bad as a local greenhouse. Like, I mean, do you okay? So let's say you live in a far north climate where you could be growing veggies with greenhouses. You know, you have to heat them. That uses a lot of greenhouse gases. But it's healthy to have vegetables. You should be eating vegetables. I think we can all agree.
Right.
It can be a lower footprint to be shipping them with using certain things. Obviously, not air. But in terms of freighters, there's an entire book actually on bananas being more eco, being shipped on freighters.
How old is this one? Is this also from 97?
Actually, 1907. So it's actually no longer true.
1907. Okay.
I'm just joking. The Earth is
God.
actually not flat because we are not round because we discovered that too long ago. It's actually flat now.
I don't know if you can like
Just
revert.
quickly
I'm gonna
also,
quote you out of context.
if you
on
go
that shit,
into
man.
if you go into
Out of
general,
context.
I've just put up the specific paper, and I'll also put up a Guardian article talking to the author of the paper, and he
Mhm.
said that it's you'll have more of an impact just switching to a vegan diet, and it all ties in obviously. So the less the less efficient diet is going to have more impact on the environment, but it also means that you're going to have less food to feed people.
Right. But that we're still talking about the local problem, right?
The local, I can find you another one as well, but I'm pretty sure it was this guy who covered it who said it's usually not the case that the locavorism is just this sort of feel good thing. And quite often it's the case, like what Mike was saying, where food shipped from interstate or internationally, it doesn't have that much of a carbon footprint compared to growing a cow for steak or whatever. Now, if you
Right. But,
fly them
but,
over, it's quite often the case that will be more that will be the case. But
but
most of
my
the
point,
time,
hold
if you
on,
just
hold on.
mine,
I agree that we shouldn't have cows for production, at least for the most part, right? I think cows are only going to be useful for like producing manure. That's the only like thing I would say. But if we're talking about local production of vegetables versus, I guess, like international, like foreign production of vegetables, right? And the idea is whether or not taken in whole, like holistically, whether or not producing locally versus producing locally is going to contribute more toward environmental change than not, right? Like that's what we're looking at.
obviously, if you hold everything steady, then if you just walk over to your neighbor's farm and pick something out of their backyard, that's obviously going to have less of an impact than getting the
Right,
same product from interstate. But
right,
if the product is expensive enough on the environment, then the fact that it's next door to you is not going to it's not going to outweigh a product being flown in either, or sorry, being shipped in from interstate or overseas. Quite
but
often,
that
even if you just
I think
mindlessly
I think
if you have
the go on,
sorry, I'm
go
just
on.
going to say quickly, if you have a vegan diet where you don't really check where the products are coming from, the chances are that it seems to be from what I've read, that will be less impactful on the environment than somebody who is a locavore eating some sort of an omnivorous diet.
Right, but we're talking about people who are having like a vegetarian diet, right? Uh, and is it better to eat locally or to not eat locally? And I think in almost all cases, it's better to eat locally because even if there was or let me phrase this, even if like everyone is vegan, the act of like having an infrastructure that can ship food around is going to negatively impact climate change, right? Like we don't want that. That's just not sustainable.
Well, just growing foods that are required by the human
One of us is cutting out.
body, growing foods that the body or
Well,
that
I
is
can't
healthier.
understand, Nick.
You can't understand me right
No,
now?
it's really ridiculous that you would say you can't understand me. That's the thing that comes in clear.
Okay, I'm trying to hold
That
this button.
actively infuriates me. All right, yeah, go on.
You are going to need to produce foods that the human body requires anyway, or to be healthier, and they will have an impact on the environment. So it's a matter of weighing which one is which. So again, in northern climate, it can be worse. But I'm honestly more curious about you supporting that position, which I believe you said we can feed more people in a system with animals, and I want to know how that works when, for example, We can talk about protein, how you can't create extra protein from animals. They have to take that nitrogen from plants. It's fixed from the atmosphere through
I
nitrogen
understand
fixation.
that you're using thermodynamics as your guiding principle.
Also, in
for
terms of protein and
plant
nitrogen, just you can't make more nitrogen.
Right, so I understand that you're using thermodynamics as like the principle in which you want to like organize production, but I think it's a little more complicated than that. I'll get like the reports that talk about having aquaponic or having like, animal agriculture as a more sustainable uh, alternative to like a pure vegan or like to a pure vegan or like non-animal based production setup. 1 second.
It'll depend on the model that you're putting up, but essentially, I think there's some like very specific modeling where you can have an animal that eats some like byproducts that humans can't do anything with, but it's going to be essentially an almost vegan diet. Things like aquaculture, as
That's
I've
fine.
heard, can be very efficient as well. But that's if you're going to compare, I guess, aquaculture's some sort of aquaculture versus a vegan diet, maybe you can produce something, but yeah, that's still probably going to be a mostly vegan diet, I'd say.
And
Right,
at the end of the day,
like the ideal part would be like if I had my way, everyone would be vegan, right? That would be like my ideal. However, in lieu of like certain physical constraints like the world we live in, seems like that might be too idealistic, right? That's what I'm getting at.
In what way? Actually, the aquaculture is something that they're still developing, so that's possibly more idealistic. Whereas if people just use the current model and just switch to a vegan diet, that seems fairly doable.
Well, that wouldn't like help with like climate change, right? Even if everyone
No,
switched
that would
to
have that would
Oh
actually
my
have a pretty big
god.
impact on climate change.
so if
And
we were to, as far as we were to like stop like having cows, etc., even with the lack of methane, like production and like in carbon emissions. Like that's like the biggest source of climate change, and were we to
so
to
you're cutting out
the
quite a bit.
problem,
I don't know if it.
right?
yeah, you sound like a robot in a tunnel.
Ah, shit.
Okay, I
Give me
think
like a
what
minute
you were
to like.
saying something like if we even if we get rid of obviously you're just conceding the cows and going for the lower or the smaller animals, so that's obviously going to be less impactful as well. But quite often people will replace calorie for calorie with these sort of I guess methods. So they'll replace one animal with another animal, generally calorie for calorie, and that brings its own problems. So something like a chicken, um, if you replace a calorie for calorie, what they often do is that the effect it'll have quite often is that it'll increase factory farm chickens and shit like that.
I mean, I don't even know what to say. It seems like you said that everyone should be on a vegan diet, so it's cool with me.
Yeah, I mean that's not. I said that like right off the bat, but I
Okay,
also
and
said that if it was the case that a vegan diet wasn't sustainable, like I would bite the bullet and say, all right, well, looks like we're gonna have to murder some animals or something, because we're gonna have to do that anyway while we have a vegan diet.
I would go further and add that in virtually any situation that you are getting animal calories, it would be more efficient to be growing plant calories. If you have just an amount of land, you can grow vertically and so forth. That no matter what, you need to get that calorie from the sun. You need to get that
All right,
nitrogen from the air, and so maybe
take a look at
maybe.
this. By the way, here's the paper I was looking at about global food production or global impacts of food production, and one of the things with vegan diets, if you're trying to farm the same plot of land, that's not going to be sustainable. You need to have like places that you farm from, right? Like the way Native Americans used to do it was a lot of when the pilgrims came by, right? They saw this pristine land. They remarked about it in all sorts of journals. Turns out most of that land is actually cared for, and Native Americans they would move in 5-year increments, so as not to tax the land over a hard, sustained way, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So This guy is actually, funnily enough, the article that you posted is the guy that I was talking about. So Joseph Paul or J. Paul this is the guy that I was talking about who has gone vegan. So I'll put up the Guardian article again, and it's him saying that he's cut animal products out of his diet because he just can't justify having done the study that you actually posted up.
But he can't justify what?
He can't justify having animal products in his diet.
Oh, yeah, I heard that properly.
I'm pretty sure I heard a radio interview with that same scientist. He's been doing a kind of promotional tour discussing his findings and how he basically became vegan after doing the math.
Yeah, so that's an article, and at the end of it, he states that he's cut animal products out of his diet purely from the research that he's done. So I don't think he's particularly concerned about the ethics of animals and how they're treated and all that. It's just purely from the ethics of the land use and the effect on the environment. He's cut it out. So like Isel was saying, he seems to have gone around, done a bit of interview work as well. I heard him do an interview where they discussed.
He's a nice guy too.
Yeah, so where they discussed, I think, sort of regenerative farming that you're talking about, in somewhere in Colombia where they have cattle farmers, and they've managed to regenerate some of the land and the farm, and one of the farmers has managed to do it. But even by their own admission, it requires an enormous amount of labor work. And what Joseph Paul has said is that it might be feasible, and given that it's difficult to get get some amount of people to quit animal products, that might be a method to reduce environmental effects and environmental damage of animal products.
I would argue
But
lab-grown
it's
meat's
really
probably a better
only.
solution.
Sorry?
Yeah, lab-grown meat. Mike was mentioning lab-grown meat, but
Yeah,
that's,
no, I agree
Continue,
with that.
continue.
That's fine. Yeah. But what he said was that it's really feasible in somewhere like maybe Colombia, where the labor cost is going to be quite low. But then once you go to anywhere pretty much like Europe, America, Australia, that's just not going to be feasible because the amount of work and organization that's required, the cost scale is just going to go way up.
okay, but the hostile clarification I have to make, obviously I don't mean in a hostile way. So you guys may not be familiar with this, Mike the Vegan and Mr. President, but already the United Nations Water Footprint Report makes it clear the ecological impacts of small scale, quote unquote, more ethical cattle farming and pig farming, any of those ruminants. It is worse than high efficiency factory farming. Factory farming genuinely is more efficient, and that's why the price is lower. So among the many, many factors involved is simply how much water is used up, how much pollution is produced per pound of meat as a finished product. And the most ecological in terms of all the measurable impacts is like the high efficiency factory farming done in the Netherlands. And then when you look at the numbers, the same math done for like third world country where it's still small plot, traditional factory farming, it is much, much worse, again, per pound of output. So that's an ethical as well as ecological clarification that a lot of people don't think of.
Quick question. If the more we factory farm, the more thermodynamic it is, does that mean the more suffering we give the animal, the better it is for that argument?
Well, in theory, factory farming could have less suffering for the animals. In theory, in practice, everyone's horrified by factory farming, but there's no reason why an animal will necessarily suffer less on a small family farm versus a large factory farm. The conditions of the animal, the conditions of slaughter, if you compare from farm to farm, some are going to be better and some are going to be worse. It's the same thing with a hospital. I can't say to you that large hospitals always treat people worse than small hospitals or small independent doctors' offices. Some are going to be bad and some are going to be worse. But the ecological
farming is to optimize the space, right? Like the reason that makes factory farming bad for chickens is because they need to optimize like per area. That's there for farming. They need to cram as much chickens as they can in there. Whereas a farm, they're not trying to like optimize per like square footage, right? They're just optimizing.
So I appreciate that you're
Yeah,
being
so
sincere.
from
Appreciate you being sincere, but actually, when you read the studies, it is a shocking and horrifying fact
Speaking of
that
the
the high
studies, do you
density.
have the links, please?
Yeah, I do. Of course, I do. Why
Like,
don't you let me finish my
sure,
sentence?
can you
Why,
post
if you're
later?
not a troll, why interrupt me mid-sentence like that?
Because
Just
this is
why?
like the third thing that you've made a claim
I
on
can
that you didn't
send you a
provide.
link, but why don't you not interrupt me mid-sentence, you fucking troll? It was shocking to me personally
You
when I
keep
first read
making
studies that were explaining
claims
that
where
in
you
terms
back
of the well-being of the chickens, raising them in high-density cage lots is actually better because, in
he
terms of the
never
chickens and the
provides
suffering
evidence.
they endure. Because why don't I finish my sentence? One of the major factors when you have chickens that have more room and are running around is that they actually attack and kill one another. They trample each other, some starve, some are injured. So even though it seems like a horrifying spectacle to look at chickens in cages, when you do the math, when you read the studies, you come to the paradoxical conclusion that the reason why human beings invented these more efficient large-scale farms where each chicken has its own little cage, it is not just more efficient. Fewer of the chickens die, horrible deaths, suffering, being pecked to death by other chickens. Chicken nature, like human nature, is not as pretty as you might want to think it is. They aren't all just friends when they have that room to run around. So it is more efficient, and fewer chickens have to be born and die to produce the same amount of meat. And the actual life cycle analysis of suffering, paradoxically, actually does favor modern methods. I'm morally opposed to all of it, but it is really interesting if you actually do reading, which is something I do. Did I interrupt you and ask if you have a fucking study when you were making your horseshit claims about fucking the value of chicken
I'm gonna
shit as
pretend
fertilizer?
that you knew that there was a pun in there.
How do I
I'm gonna
turn the
pretend you knew that
volume
there was a
down?
pun
Can you give me a
in there.
citation for your claims
Because
of manure, you piece of shit?
I did. Correct. Now drop the link that you were talking about.
Off-topic question. This is a completely different branch. But if the world was to go vegan, animals such as cows, sheep, do you think they would go extinct as a?
I did
A lot
a
of
whole
them are
analysis of
bred.
this, in-depth analysis. So obviously, we breed these animals, and it really depends on how you want to do it. If you want to keep slaughtering them, you can basically bring them down to whatever level you want, and you could obviously just keep them alive in sanctuaries and so forth. Like for example, if the world went vegan, obviously vegans who care a lot about animals would be the ones in control of what happens to the animals. And so you can either do a fast or slow scenario. Fast scenarios within a few years, if you continue slaughter at the current rate, it's basically dairy cows making it up to 4 years on average before they're spent. After that, basically every animal will be slaughtered. Almost all 70 billion land animals that we have on Earth will be slaughtered. Or you can let them live out their natural lifespan, which again, longest is cows, which is about 20 years. So in about 20 years, you can have whatever level of animals you want. So you can just dedicate however much animal sanctuary space you want.
My thing with that
this is
is,
basically just a massive plug for Mike's YouTube channel.
Well, I did an in-depth thing. All the numbers, every single, the life expectancies of all these.
could you
I'm
link
already
that to me,
subscribed,
Mike?
man. You don't have to sell it to me.
I am on my phone. If I leave this, I can't hear you.
Oh, that's fair.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any more questions or anything like that? So I can.
No.
You said, Mike, that let them live out their
Except for
natural
diesel.
lifespan. Is being hunted or killed by another predator part of the natural life cycle?
I mean, people would have to decide how much they would want to rewild. I mean, you could rewild massive corridors. From the 2007 land use study from the USDA, about half of the lower 48 land is used for animal agriculture. So that would free up a ton of land, so you could decide how much you want to rewild. And I as a vegan, at least, am not trying to stop nature. Like, I'm about reinstilling nature.
I dropped a link from 2019 about carrying capacity for land. It seems that
That's the Elementa study I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, a vegan, I think, doesn't have the highest. I think lacto-vegetarian had the highest.
And so that's where, again, I was responding to.
I
That's
think
the study that
Calorie.
looked at, they did not look at arable land in what I view as an accurate way. I also have a whole video about this called Why Vegan Diet Failed Land Use Study. But it's a matter of, again, they didn't look at like anything that wasn't currently growing crops, which you could obviously grow crops on, was not counted at all. And so, and there's just things like terracing, like any land that is too hilly, has mountains, is considered not arable. Places that you could not be grazing, you could be growing massive amounts. And there, so they were saying there's a large swath of land that can only be used for grazing, which is completely inaccurate. Things you can grow like hemp and so many things. I mean, we also, I could go further into this, but just the fact that China is starting to green the desert in reasonable amounts using like microbes and cross hatching of wind barriers and growing a ton of plants and orchards and all these things. I mean, just the idea of arable land that they have in that study is laughable. Again, that's the study that showed that vegan diets use 1/6 of the land as omnivores.
I just sent links. I was requested to provide articles, which is totally reasonable to interrupt someone in mid-sentence. It takes a few minutes to go and copy and paste links, you piece of shit. If you actually want to do some fucking reading, you can click on the fucking links, or you can watch my YouTube video discussing it. Not yourself.
All right, thanks for the links. I'll go over it right now. Just so I'm clear, the claims you were making was that it's actually better for like animal happiness to be on factory farms, right?
Well, that's a totally reasonable summary of what I said. Why should I even bother talking when you're so perspicacious and able to summarize?
You're so welcome. Absolutely welcome.
Dude, have you been sincere in this discussion, or are you just trolling? I mean, are you just doing this to piss off a bunch of vegans? Like, what's in?
I haven't pissed off any vegans.
The way you keep moving the goalposts and changing the point of the debate, I just don't get it.
Mr. President, did I piss you off by any chance?
Of course not. President's cool as an iceberg.
Who else is here that I might have pissed off? Mr. Thermodynamics. Here, I'll even start off being slightly sardonic.
But if you were sincere at any point, then when one of these issues fell, you change your view, right? Like you accepted, you were presented with evidence, eggs are not health food, right? Basically.
Right, but I Googled
so doesn't that change your view of the issue?
All sorts of conflicting pieces of information.
Okay, anyway, it just seems to me like so many fundamental tenets you presented were refuted very easily.
What was one of the fundamental? What were some of the fundamental tenets that were refuted? Go for it.
Your claims about fertilizer, your claims about health benefits.
Okay, that's generic. What were my claims? Tell me a claim that.
I am not really interested in recapitulating this.
Good. More rhetoric. Okay, more fucking rhetoric.
People have taken the time to provide you with sources and considerations.
Right, and I had a productive conversation with Mr. President. But what you're saying just seems to be literally all rhetoric or nonsense, right? And I'm still going over this link just to make sure what you were saying before about chickens, like having better lives in cages, for example, than dying better.
Why would you care? Why is it that you just keep moving the goalposts when you're presented with this?
What goalposts am I moving?
At the beginning of this conversation is that chicken eggs are so healthy that they justify this form of agriculture.
When did I say that? Now you're lying. Now you're
then why wouldn't the argument collapse when that's been refuted?
Now you're actively lying. It's weird that you have to lie to not look like a fool.
Mike the vegan took the time to present you with all this shit. Everyone has links to studies. You said like, oh, well, if eggs are unhealthy, why don't you have studies? Everyone has a ton of studies.
Yeah.
I posted the summary graphic.
We all posted studies, right?
Change at that point? Why do you keep moving the goalposts and keep trying to defend this position?
Literally, right? We were talking about the health of eggs. We talked about the health of cholesterol and a healthy diet, right? I've shown like there's a lot of conflicting information about it, and I posted all of these things, right? Now, for example, you want to say, I'll even throw you a bone, that I was saying something like eggs are just bad or are just healthy to eat, right? Now, I didn't say that. I said eggs in moderation can be fine, right? And you can eat them, and it's part of a healthy diet, which is corroborated by like multiple state, except for Australia, apparently they might be the smartest one on this one. Multiple state-based dietary functions, right? For example, the United States says it's fine, and it's part of a healthy diet to eat 1 to 2 eggs a day, right?
Okay, so let's do this. Ask yourself style. Let's do this logical spectrum style. If every time I ate broccoli, I had to kill a chicken, Just for no reason, that was the rule on planet Earth. If ethically, now broccoli is unbelievably healthy. I was saying to you before, like just look at the fucking stats about how unhealthy eggs are compared to
Why
beans.
do you have to
But
convince me that broccoli
is legitimate healthy. And if you don't believe that, just agree with me for the sake of the hypothetical example that broccoli is a really healthy food. If I had to kill a chicken, every time I ate broccoli, I would refuse to eat broccoli, right? But your beginning position seemed to be that eggs had such extraordinarily positive nutritional value that it was justified to
What did I
maintain
say that implied that?
Wait, 1 second. Don't you have to kill the broccoli to eat the broccoli, though? I know.
That's true. You gotta murder the broccoli.
You wouldn't believe
Actually,
how much
broccoli is a
broccoli,
flower. Broccoli is a flower. You
just-
don't need to kill the plant.
But we
Yeah,
do,
sure,
though.
yeah, as well.
Harvest,
But the
don't we?
stems are delicious, though.
I have broccoli in my garden. You can cut it and harvest over.
Just also, Socrates, what the link that you put up, I think it was in Debate Crucible text. So that's actually by someone called Maria Luz Fernandez. And just to sort of put on the
Wait, which
the
one?
sort
The
of
carrying
tinfoil
capacity
hat.
one?
No, the eggs one.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so that one, if you go and look at the author, it's by someone called ML Fernandez, so Maria Luz Fernandez. She's a, well, to basically use tinfoil hat rhetoric, she's basically a shill for the egg industry. I can get you I should be able to get you a set of letters or emails from the egg board where a article came out saying something bad about the egg industry, and they name her as I think they name her as their friend in the science community who can write a positive article in behalf of eggs.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would find that like a disqualifying thing, like if she's just a shill. So let me go look at the other lists of like, because there's like a bunch of articles that one just seemed to be the best written one in terms of, not in terms of science, just in terms of like presenting the idea across.
It's also
But that's
worth
thanks for pointing.
reiterating. It's also worth reiterating something I typed in earlier before I talked, where it's illegal to advertise eggs as healthy according to the FDA, just based off their nutrition.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
Yes, I mentioned that before too. The PCRM court case. I did actually already cover that. A lot of the stuff's been said before, and it is interesting. Reading about PCRM's case is fascinating.
With a glass of wine a day is considered healthy, but I don't think you're allowed to advertise it as such. You can't advertise bottles of wine as health food.
What's considered healthy? Sorry.
A glass of wine a day.
Oh.
But you're unable to.
Hey,
let me just double check that. Actually,
I post this in Debate Crucible one. Take a look at this. All right, now this. Tell me if there's anything wrong with this particular study, Mr. President.
If I open that, I'll leave, but it looks like it's actually just describing it as a food for animals. Maybe.
No, this is a food for human health.
Okay, I was just reading the first sentence because I can't open it unless,
The title
if I open it, I can't.
Nutritional value, bioactivities, and emerging benefits for human health.
Okay, yeah, literally, it stops at emerging ben. So.
Oh, gotcha. I got you.
do you believe it's the egg that's at fault, or just the dosage we are taking of eggs?
A single egg puts you up to the daily
problem with eggs, the biggest problem with eggs is the contribution to cholesterol is like just bad in general, right? So it's a case that like eggs to be fair, like people that have.
Sorry to cut you off, but you're very robotic.
But whether or not
understand.
like the correlation is very disease, that seems to be. Oh, am I cutting out?
You were to start with, but then you got good again as I interrupted you. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. It's just that eggs, like if you're at risk for heart disease, you want to avoid eggs. You want to just completely cut off cholesterol entirely. If you're healthy without at risk, if you're healthy and not at risk, then you could sneak in eggs, but it's probably better not.
traditionally, how I believe we first got eggs, we would have to put a lot of effort into gathering an egg because they're either high in a tree or defended by some kind of bird, which means the energy we got from an egg would have counteracted all the energy we got to get the egg. Nowadays, we're all lazy. So I agree multiple eggs would be bad for you now, just because we're not using that energy.
I'm not sure. I think if you're going back that far, that those people wouldn't have had much to eat anyway. So an egg is certainly better than stuff. But overall, I think
It gives you like fat for like a
there's
long
also
period of time.
yeah. But if if your lifespan's 40 or 50, then it probably doesn't matter too much if you're eating eggs.
And bottom line, I mean, you can have negative things that you can eat in a certain amount and be healthy. I mean, I could do a line of cocaine and probably be okay. And you can smoke a certain amount of cigarettes that won't increase disease. That doesn't mean that it's part of healthy diet, in my opinion. And that's why vegans are the only ones with average levels of cholesterol that don't progress atherosclerosis.
I can have a better look at. I've just had a quick look over. It seems to be saying and linking a lot of the same previous studies I've seen before that you've the one that you put up. I can have a better look at it if you want and get back to
Yeah,
you.
give
But
me.
it
Make
seems to
sure
be a
that
lot
there's
of
no like shills in this one.
the one of the links that they've put in is actually Maria Luz Fernandez. So I think it's
Motherfucker.
link number 6. So they're using one of her studies, but yeah. So like I don't want to say like because with a lot of studies, there's even studies that I put up that are like funded or at least partially funded, or the researchers would have got funding in the past through pharmaceutical companies or something like that. I don't want to say just like across the board that someone getting a funding from a certain group or whatever is necessarily something to just to ignore immediately. It's more no, it's a bit of a pain in the ass with the egg industry because what they've done is a lot of the stuff that they've said, or pretty much everything that they've said with their studies, is not incorrect. It's just the way that they've framed it, and that's sort of the trick. Maria Luz Fernandez, I specifically highlight as being a bad person because the egg industry. I always, it takes me a bit of time to find this set of emails, but I think Michael Greger and Bite Size Vegan have done like a video on it, and you can read the emails. But they've, I think, named her directly as being one of their people. So yeah, I put up studies from that are like statins and whatever else, which show a certain result. So it's not just that they're paid off or paid by a certain industry or whatever. It's more how they've designed the study and what their purpose is, I guess, and the way.
That's always going to go be part of the evaluation of a source. So that's good to know.
Well, let's draw conclusions. Why don't you guys wrap it up? Who do you think won? Should we all be eating chicken eggs for the value of the manure they produce? Or
Should we all go back to factory farming like Easel wants?
I missed the manure argument for the egg, sorry.
Just that chickens tend to be good for like local farms, right? Their manure is like pretty useful. They're high phosphate producing manure or containing manure. I'm sorry, but eventually they can actually poison the ground. So you gotta be. So you need like nitrogen fixing or like or like things that are like high in phosphate requirements if you're gonna have like a lot of chickens.
All right, is there anything else we want to talk about? I think we kind of covered all that. All this.
Yeah, I think we covered it.
so, having been presented with this stuff, the only name I know you by is Eiselbuster. I don't know why you chose that name, why you were given it, but what has your position changed?
Yeah.
Okay, glad to hear it.
Dude, I've never heard anybody say that before.
Despite your best intentions, I was able to change my position is something better. Thank you. Mostly it was Mr. President. And I guess was it Mike the vegan? Are you the thermodynamics
That's
guy?
me. Sorry, I couldn't actually give you research on right now because
I
all
mean,
my videos have like 20
you didn't play
steps.
a part in it, but I appreciate talking to you.
Oh,